Edgar Allan Poe, The Art of Engaging the Reader, by Ekaterina Bason. There are millions of literary pieces written and published in the world. However, not all of them are read and known. Some works demonstrate an elegant style and a deep knowledge on a particular subject, and yet they fail to gain popularity. Other narratives, on the contrary, attract the audience despite their at times grim and peculiar content. The works of the American author Edgar Allan Poe, for instance, leave readers petrified and sometimes even shocked. Despite that fact, his prose and poetry are hard to put down, as they suck the readers into the narrative, making them a part of the story. Poe achieves his effect by applying a variety of linguistic elements to his texts. In his works, The Fall of the House of Usher, The Pit and the Pendulum, and Annabel Lee, the writer chooses words that connote sadness, decay, and death, while arranging them in elegant sentences filled with lyrical diction, alliteration, and other stylistic devices that enhance reading experience. By manipulating syntax, rhythm, diction, tone, and phonology, Poe manages to create a gothic atmosphere that combines darkness with beauty, producing an irresistible mixture that evokes dread and pleasure at the same time, and making the audience not only finish reading their text, but also experience it. When people see the world outside, they use all five basic senses to interpret the reality: vision, touch, hearing, smell, and taste. However, when a writer tries to create a fictional world, he cannot put a picture in front of his audience or spray a specific smell, so the only tool he can use is words, and he must learn to deliver all the sensations through the language of his work. One of the writers who mastered that skill is the first American horror writer, Edgar Allan Poe. Poe's talent really shines in his most known short story, The Fall of the House of Usher, which bears a prominent signature of his unique style. In it, besides the grim plot, Poe creates a depressing atmosphere by using several techniques particular to his writing. First, the author chooses the first-person point of view, making the narrator one of the characters of the story. That allows him to put his readers closer to the disturbing situation and let them experience the thrill of the situation in a more acute way. Plus, Poe's narrator is unreliable, which increases the suspense and builds tension. Second, Poe writes in a very rhythmic manner. His language is poetic and full of alliteration, repetition of sound, during the whole of a dark, dull, and soundless day, an iciness, a sinking, a sickening of the heart, sense of insufferable gloom pervaded my spirit. Third, the author uses thick descriptive layers that communicate all five basic senses. An atmosphere which had no affinity with the air of heaven, but which had reeked up from the decayed trees, the gray wall, and the silent tarn, a pestilent and mystic vapor, dull, sluggish, faintly discernible, and leaden-hued. Poe puts a special accent on the description, which makes his sentences extremely complex and lengthy. During the whole of a dull, dark, and soundless day, in the autumn of the year, when the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens, I had been passing alone on horseback through a singularly dreary tract of country, and at length found myself, as the shades of the evening drew on, within a view of the melancholy house of Usher. To make his style even more unique, Poe uses a lot of rare words: tarn, cadaverousness, and reveler. The author uses a certain diction in order to create an atmosphere of pressure and gloom, choosing words that connote all the shades of unpleasantness: desolate, terrible, bleak, ghastly, decayed, and utter depression of soul, and mention of gloom. In The Fall of the House of Usher, Poe is touching upon the subject of reality and delusion. Yet in another short story, The Pit and the Pendulum, he develops this theme even further. This narration tells a grim story about a character captured and tortured by Spanish Inquisition. The entire piece balances on the edge between life and death, consciousness and delirium, primitive instinct to survive, and deep rhetorical contemplations. The main character swings like a pendulum in and out of sane awareness while trying to avoid falling into the abyss. Poe opens The Pit and the Pendulum with the scene in which his character is put to trial that eventually sends him to hell. To underline the importance of the situation, Poe repeats the words with suffixes I-O-N, accentuation, revolution, association, and exaggeration. In the second part of the first passage, Poe starts repeating the words with suffixes less and ness, meaningness, nothingness, blackness, darkness. The suffix ness forms nouns out of practically any adjective, and the suffix less can be viewed as its antonym, as it produces adjectives out of nouns with the meaning of without something. Besides the contradictive meaning of the morphemes used, these suffixes do share a commonality, a phoneme s, which sounds like hissing of a snake. As the narrative gains momentum, Poe utilizes even more repetitions to underline the intensity of the situation and the character's fight for sanity. The author uses repetitive exclamatory sentences with synonyms that continuously gradate in their intensity. In the deepest slumber, no. In delirium, no. In a swoon, no. In death, no. Just like in Fall of the House of Usher, Poe strives to engage all 5 basic senses of his readers. So he gives vivid descriptions of smell. The odor of the sharp steel forced itself onto my nostrils. Touch. Plainly I received the loosening of the bandage. And the taste. This thirst, it appeared to be the design of my persecutors to stimulate, for the food in the dish I was meat pungently seasoned. Even though The Fall of the House of Usher and The Pit and the Pendulum have many similarities such as unreliable first-person narrator, the theme of delusion, and heavy descriptive layers, they do have some differences. Unlike the first narrative, The Pit and the Pendulum does not feature a sophisticated and adorned diction. On the contrary, here, the choice of words is plain and matter-of-fact, and instead of a high register level, Poe uses a more natural one. Another change that linguists can observe in Poe's style is the usage of less bulky and more simplistic syntax. Such transition from the ornate and lengthy to short and straightforward can be explained by the change of pace in the second story. The protagonist in The Fall of the House of Usher has time to stop and ponder his surroundings as he enjoys passing alone on horseback through a countryside or tries to understand his friend while spending time with him. The narrator in The Pit and the Pendulum has no time, desire, or intention to savor the moment. Another Poe's work that shares a lot of similarities with the two mentioned above is his poem Annabel Lee. When students read the verse for the first time, they might find it a little confusing. The narrator without a name tells a story about his beloved. Him and Annabel Lee live in the unidentified kingdom by the sea. They are so in love that angels covet their relationship and they take away the girl, imprisoning her. Soon Annabel Lee dies because she catches a cold. Even though at first the poem might seem bizarre and contradictory, when going deeper in its analysis, linguists can come to a conclusion that it is an exquisite masterpiece in which not a single word is accidental. The poem opens with a phrase that could have started a fairy tale. It was many and many years ago in a kingdom by the sea. That romantic beginning implies that the time with Annabel was a very happy and idyllic period for the narrator, maybe even so perfect that it was too good to be true. Kingdom by the sea is repeated several times throughout the poem and constitutes a refrain, which is like a chorus in a song. It makes the verse rhythmic and possesses a crucial meaning. Another significant word in the poem is sea, that also ends the poem. While kingdom acts as the reign of men who try to manipulate the couple, sea represents nature and the inevitable flow of life and death. Students can notice that the poem that has such a romantic beginning is actually a very grim and sad story. Poe skillfully mixes the dreamy theme of love and dark topic of death. Even though the poem Annabel Lee is very different from the two stories mentioned above, all three masterpieces share a signature stamp of the author's exquisite style. In his article Philosophy of Composition, Edgar Allan Poe writes that creating a literary work is like solving a mathematical problem, and that in the whole composition there should be no word written of which the tendency, direct or indirect, is not to the one pre-established design. Another common feature to all works of Poe is their length. One can read them in one sitting. So Poe puts a special accent on the needs of his audience. Besides keeping his stories and poems short, the author utilizes a dense and complex language that aims to satisfy the exquisite tastes of his 19th century contemporaries. While trying to define the purpose of his writing, Poe states that pleasure which is at once the most intense, the most elevating, and the most pure is, I believe, found in the contemplation of the beautiful. So even though Poe's narratives and poems are all different, his writing is always elegant, highly thought through, rhythmic, and unique. To some, popularity of Poe's grim stories might seem strange. However, under a closer observation, linguists can recognize an immense talent in Poe and his works. Many writers try to interest readers in their stories. However, not many of them take pride in achieving Poe's heights. The reason why Poe's works are so popular is the author's ability to take his audience's experiences to a whole new level. Not only he is capable to grab their attention with an intriguing plot, but also by varying diction, syntax, rhythm, and sound, he engages readers' five basic senses. By utilizing contrast in his narratives, Poe creates an irresistible world where his reader can hear, touch, see, smell, and even taste. Besides, one can say that Poe's stories are not as depressive as students might think. After all, light can shine brighter on the background of darkness, and it is in the shadow of death when people can find an incredible taste for life. Thus, one can paraphrase the author's words about Hawthorne and say that Poe's style is purity itself. Force abounds. High imagination gleams from every page. Surely, Edgar Allan Poe is a man of the truest genius.